Welcome to the Nurse Mark Podcast, where we talk about everything health, happiness, cannabis. We'll delve into all aspects of what it means to live a powerful, healthy life. Everything from exercise to nutrition to mindfulness, and how to use cannabis as a means to alleviate some of the most common health issues we face. My motivation and passion come from the fact that I personally had to explore all these areas to deal with lifelong depression and mood disorder. For me, it's personal. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hey, folks, welcome to the next episode of the Nurse Mark Podcast. My guest this week is Jamie Rollins. Now, she's a practicing cannabis nurse in the state of Florida. She's got her bachelor's in nursing, and she's a certified yoga instructor. Her specialty is hospice, and she's been able to merge hospice and cannabis medicine. And she's on a mission to educate her fellow hospice nurses, administrators, patients, and families about the power of cannabis as a medicine for palliation. Jamie started True Health Consulting in 2018, and she offers cannabis guidance and consulting services for individuals and businesses. You're really going to like this episode, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. All right, folks, welcome to the Nurse Mark Podcast. And my special guest this week is Jamie Rollins. Jamie, welcome to the Nurse Mark Podcast.
Thanks for the invite. I'm glad to be here to chat about what we're going to be talking about today.
And you know what? We are going to chat about hospice nursing and cannabis. I'm ready. Let's talk about just that. So, all right, background story. How did you get into hospice nursing?
I've taken a little bit of a different path in my nursing career. I knew from like the get-go I did not want to be in a hospital setting. It was not for me. I always wanted to be out in the community. And so I ended up doing a lot of community nursing paths, psychiatric nursing, in the community, home health. I did a lot in that regard, but I hadn't tried hospice yet. And I was living in San Diego, California, and had gone through a divorce and had just come off a year of not working as a nurse at all. I was studying to become a yoga teacher in that year and took a year off to kind of hone that skill and to just kind of take a break from nursing. I had honestly just burned out. So I went back into nursing with like hospice, like one of the heaviest emotional like spaces. And I loved it. I absolutely fell in love with it. And it was everything I thought when I went to become a nurse, what nursing was supposed to be. So I feel like we were pretty much lied to in nursing school what we do as nurses. You know, we find out when we actually get out of school and we're in the job. Like, I really thought nursing was more of at the bedside, comforting, holding, managing symptoms, being there to nurture the families and the patients, and just to have that experience. And I found out very quickly that's not really what nursing was like. But when I entered hospice, I was like, I'm home. This is the kind of nursing I've wanted to do. I just didn't know it was there. So that's how I started my hospice journey. And it took breaks in between because, again, it's really heavy work and I'm pretty empathic. So I had to learn about, holding space and not taking in all that grief. So it's been a beautiful journey of my spiritual evolution as well.
That is really cool. I actually got involved in hospice before I was ever a nurse. Like in the late 2000s, I was asked to join a board of a local hospice here in the Boston area. And they're the largest and oldest nonprofit hospice, which I really like the fact that they're nonprofit because their mission is not about making money, right? Their mission is truly about giving care. So I know what you mean. So I got my intro to hospice in a totally different way than you did, but found it to be that same like spiritual path, right? It was really, really solid, really nursing work, right? So when I got my nursing degree and when I was in my final year of my bachelor's, I had a capstone and I had to do 60 hours of community nursing. And I did it at that hospice. So it was really cool. Like I was on the
Was it
board.
an inpatient or were you visiting patients in their
No,
home?
visiting, like visiting. Yeah.
Making home visits.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
Yeah.
So you got to
Yeah.
see
So
that
it was,
firsthand.
it was really good. Yeah. So I had a 60-hour component that I needed to do with that same group. So it was really cool. I had board experience for 3 or 4 years, and then I was actually a nurse in the field. So I get what you mean about the essence of hospice nursing, because I did long-term care right out of school, and that was just slinging meds, baby. I just, 22 patients a night, and I got good at giving everybody all of their medications and making sure that they were comfortable. But there was really no what I perceived to be nursing going on. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
I
Yeah.
could
I
have
mean,
just been a med card, right? I could have been an automated med card, and that would have
well,
been the same interaction.
it would. That's the issue I had, like within just in nursing in general, like even home care was the ridiculous amount of patients they expect you to see and the charting they expect you to do in the work. It felt like factory stuff. There was you didn't have room to have
What it
heart and
is.
time and space. And I mean, it was just
Hmm.
patients profit. And it's sad. I was
Yeah.
so not in alignment with like what my heart wanted to do and what my career was offering. I really
Hmm.
struggled there for a bit, which is why
Yeah.
I left and became a yoga instructor for a minute.
Well, yeah, which
I'm
is
glad
which
that and
is
that
really a
that
cool thing.
experience helped me through hospice, helped me to help families to breathe, to calm, to
Hmm.
connect, to ground.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm really grateful I did that before I stepped into this very big space of lots of emotion, you know?
Mm. Yeah, lots of emotion. You're
Well,
right.
and there's different spots in hospice nursing too that, I don't know if they realize in regards to, there's a nurse that makes home visits that will be like once or twice a week as like a care manager, case
Hmm.
manager. And then there's a team that does like PRN visits, like they're the on-call. So if you are needing a nurse in the middle of the night, that on-call team provides that.
Hmm.
And then there's something called crisis care or critical care. And that was predominantly what I did. That's what I loved. And that is sitting at the bedside for 12-hour shifts with one patient, because that patient typically they're having symptoms that cannot be managed by the family, that they need a skilled professional at the bedside. And so
Hmm.
that's what I did. I was an symptom management, expert in symptom management. And that's that's the nursing I wanted to do, where
Hmm.
I could look at them and the way their color looked and the way they were breathing, and I would know that there was a change, or I would be able to pick up like a sound of like fluid in the lungs. I know it would be time to give atropine. Like I just got so
Yeah.
good at getting connected with that patient and
Hmm.
picking up those cues that I was able to really help do that job of being there at the bedside, comforting them. And a lot of people would say to me, so you basically just sit there all day? And it was so disheartening. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
I just
not it
sit
at all.
here. I just sit
Yeah.
here all day. I mean, it's
Yeah.
active work. You have to be on. You have to be, no matter what's going on in your life. My life was falling apart, and I
Yep.
had to keep it together and deal with this heavy load of everybody else's, stuff who was falling apart. My patients, the families. Because
Hmm.
Mark, as a nurse, it's always the families that.
Oh, those are the folks that you really are working with, right?
That's where we use our
The
nursing
patients
skills.
typically in that setting are like, "Yep, I'm pretty much accepting this is going to happen," and the family's like, "No,
Hmm.
no," and
Yeah.
that's the work that really gets done. But I can imagine that sitting at the bedside doing that type of work, you really make a connection with that patient, even if they're not present all the time with you because they're at end of life, right? You still make a connection with that patient. It's got to be just so special.
Yeah. I mean, I have stories upon stories of the connections, or what was so mind blowing to me in this field is the connections that I had that weren't with the patient. It was spirit. There was a whole different layer of energy when you're working with the dying. People who are so close to that veil or that next realm. That's what I love. It was like you could feel the energy of that space. Yeah, that was what gave me
Mm,
the tingles. It was like something so outside my realm, but it's just so intriguing because we just don't know. We don't know what happens. We don't know who's there.
we don't
But
know.
there's energetically, I would get
Yep,
goosebumps about a half hour before a patient was going to die.
you could tell.
No, I was like,
Yeah.
that was spirit telling me, hey, heads up, maybe
Yeah.
this is time to start preparing the family. And I used to be
Yeah.
really nervous about sharing things like that. I don't care anymore, but for fear of people thinking
Oh,
I was
yeah.
nuts, but it was a
People who aren't in, I guess people who aren't in tune with spirit and energy. I mean, and that's a huge part of yoga. In my past history, I studied as a yoga instructor as well. And it was, and I came to yoga not because of the physicality of it, which a lot of people do. I came really for the spiritual side of it, right?
Yeah.
So it was that heart connection. And so, we have that in common, that, we get that there's a spirit realm that we don't see. Like, we have five senses. They're all real, not very finely honed senses to begin with. Right.
But
Yeah.
but that's where cannabis fits so beautifully in this space. Being that she's such a sacred, connected plant.
Been around forever, like in the human space. It's been here. It's a very short window of time that we've killed it, right? That's it.
Yeah. But it belongs in this space. When I found the two, it was like, wow.
Yeah. So this is a perfect spot to talk about that. So you're a hospice nurse. You really feel like that was your calling, and you finally found it. And now, you get introduced to cannabis, or you figure out this connection, which, by the way, I think that cannabis has a huge role to play in the hospice environment. We'll talk about that in a bit. Or maybe we'll talk about it now. So how did you get involved in the cannabis world? Because we all have a weird story about that.
Yeah. Oh God, I don't even know where to start. It's like so many, but
yeah, I know.
I really got started in the cannabis world and cannabis nursing with my first nursing job. I was fired from my first nursing job for a positive THC test because I was self-medicating for anxiety, PTSD, and I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't using any CBD. I was, and I was in California, so I did get my med card.
Yeah. So so here's a problem that I have. If you are a medical patient and it's allowed in the state, you're being fired from a job for positive THC, I think, is just criminal, and it's ridiculous.
It was ludicrous. They also wanted me to go to rehab.
Ridiculous. Yeah, of course. And they'll report you to the nursing board, and you could lose your license. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And
so here I am, year one, brand new. I had just moved from Vermont to California. They paid for my travel. At that time, they were like literally hiring new grads everywhere and paying them thousands of dollars for relocation assistance, sign-on bonuses. And I get fired, and I was terrified. I was so full of shame. I was like, what am I going to do? I'm out here in California. I might not have a nursing license in a few months. They are going to report. It was one of the most like ground shattering kind of moments in my life. I actually contemplated ending my life at that point because I thought there was nothing left. I was like, oh, great.
Right.
I just studied
You just studied for 5 years, 4 or 5 years. You've got a degree. Now you're going to lose your license because you were self-medicating in a legal state with a legal product that, it's just ridiculous. Which, by the way, healthcare workers, first responders, police, military are the number one people who should be using cannabis as a medicine.
I say that, nurse
number one.
I say that all the time.
Because we're the ones who end up in these very stressful situations that cause these mental illness issues like PTSD and
our nervous system is constantly like this.
Yes. Yes. And that rewires your brain.
The military, we should all be able to at least use CBD to start. And then, let's talk about the conversation. But for the love of God, let people use CBD. The nurses so when I worked in hospice, I was kind of like, we're jumping around a bit here, but I was underground kind of as like the cannabis nurse in the realm. So my nurse friends working hospice would come to me and they would be like, what can I use? They were all so stressed out. So depressed.
The job is stressful.
And I was just like, please try this. Am I going to get drug tested? Is it going to come up on a drug test? And I said, well, honestly, it probably will. I ended up supporting a brand that had a CBD, CBG, no THC. I prefer full spectrum, but I found I guess get what they need and bring them what they need, meet patients where they're at.
Right.
So I
Right.
had to meet them where they were at, but you know what? I had opened up a lot of eyes in regards to what cannabis actually is and how it can help you. And so those nurses then started to have conversations with it. So I was like thinking in my head, I'm like, here I am, like undercover, and I'm like creating this little web of like, you know, like nurses who are like on the prowl now talking to their patients about
Yeah.
cannabis. And I was just like, you know,
Welcome to cannabis.
yeah, I mean, and
That's it.
going back to what you had, you know, what you had asked about how I got started in it.
Yeah.
You know, I got fired. I went through this torrid journey of like hurting my back. I blew out L4, L5, L5S1 from a patient. And I was on a bunch of pills and I was going through the system and I was sick of the pharmaceuticals. I was sick of not getting better. I was sick of the weight gain. I was just sick of my life.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I started to try other things, yoga, eating differently. I lost some weight. I, you know, started to use CBD on a regular basis, THC on a regular basis. And I didn't really care anymore. So that's kind of just my story of, you know, how I actually got into it. But then coming into hospice, I mean, with nursing, it's always a little sketchy. We're all sketched out. We don't really know how to talk about it. We don't want to say anything. We can't really admit we use it. So it's totally this like undercover operation within our facilities.
Right.
And that's really, I started to get involved in the ACNA and then the Cannabis Nurses Network. And I got involved in those groups. I started to learn more. I naturally have a big mouth. I speak about basically everything.
Now you seem very introverted. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm
There's a stigma
I'm glad
to
you've
it.
come
I'm
out of your
talking about
shell
it.
here in the Nurse Mark podcast, Jamie, because, you know, I expected you would be really like quiet. I heard you were introverted, but no.
So, you know, I walked into the space and I'm like, no, this needs to be talked about. And
Yeah.
I've always had a voice for things. And I just naturally felt like it was an alignment. I knew that this was something I had to bring my voice to, especially for this patient population. And I just immediately knew, and it was alignment. And that's what I started to do. I would go into homes and I would straight up ask, did anybody ever introduce you? I mean, every single one of my hospice patients was a qualifying condition for Florida Medical Marijuana Program. Every
one of them.
Okay. So my mission every time I went into a home, after I got to know them, they trust me, you know, I would straight up ask, did anybody mention medical cannabis as an option for palliation for your family member? And I would get obviously 1 or 2 responses, you know, yes or no. I had a patient who had bladder cancer and he passed when I was there. And I was talking with the wife and I said, did anybody mention, you know, using medical cannabis for you? And she said, yes, we spoke to the oncologist, but he said that it probably wouldn't be helpful. And in those moments, because here it is, oh God, I gotta take a breath.
Yeah, I know.
Because it's
fired up. I just like that. I knew where you were going with it as soon as you said it, because that oncologist has zero knowledge of cannabis medicine, zero, but is making an opinion. And those people, you know, look to the physician as the specialist and the one who knows things, right? God. And so patient, I can guarantee that patient suffered needlessly.
Correct. And that's what really pissed me off.
Oh,
so I got his card and I gave him a call. I was professional, but I was like, hey, listen, you know, I had a patient and I had a conversation. So that's what I did. But I was furious because you're right. Unnecessary suffering. Unnecessary. Stigma. It just drives me insane. It's like, and I wish that sometimes they were at the bedside to witness what was going on, because these physicians sometimes, God love them, we need them, but they don't understand what's happening when a patient is actually dying. I had a physician one time refuse.
Well, no, because their role is to keep them alive as long as possible.
Well, that's what they're trained to do. That's the story. That's what they're trained to do. So, you know, it's essentially in their training.
Right. Yeah. Right. And it is. So it's difficult for them to even have that conversation many times. I mean, it's part of their training is to have that conversation that I really can't do anything more for you. This is end of life. And it's a difficult conversation because, again, the focus is keep somebody alive at all costs, Well,
and I don't want to
discredit. World, that's not our thing. In the hospice world, it's like,
it's a complete
we're going to help you transition to what is this natural occurring event that we'll all eventually get to, by the way.
And have the best quality of life while doing that, you know?
You know what? That brings up a question, and I have not asked this of anybody else, Jamie. So you're so lucky that you're going to get this question. What's your view on death? Because being a hospice nurse, you have to have sort of a really firm idea about death, right? Because you deal with it all the time and you help other people deal with the reality. What's your perception of death? I mean, nobody knows what happens afterwards, right? But
Mm-mm.
reality is a made up story. So what's your story about death?
I that's a really good question. My feelings on death is that literally I think we're souls, we're energies, we're little bodies of energies. And it's a physical shell that we are kind of walking through, and disease or cancer or illness is just kind of the decay of that physical shell.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and I say this because I know that when there's a body in front of me and they're still breathing and they are still physically alive with vital signs, but I know that soul has actually, I know that soul has actually vacated that body.
Mm-hmm.
Something changes. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, witnessing that so many times over and over again, I mean, I literally have felt energy stand up out of a body, move through me through the door and leave.
Mm-hmm.
So having seen and witnessed and felt that so many
Mm-hmm.
times, my truth, my reality is that we're just all walking around in these shells that we happen to get for a little bit of time, and we can, try and treat them well so they stick around longer. But that soul is we have a mission here and a journey. And when that journey is kind of finished, that soul then transitions to another vessel. That's kind of my thought on death. And I think death is, people give me crap all the time about this too. Like, I think death is a beautiful thing. It is a beautiful moment. It is like
it can
birth.
be a beautiful moment. Absolutely.
Many times it has. People think hospice is super scary and there are all these terrible deaths. That's not the case. I mean, the majority of deaths that I have attended and, had the blessing and privilege to bear witness to have been peaceful, loving, calm, very easy, just slipping away. So it's not so scary. I have had some bad deaths. Those will stick with me. I have some post-traumatic stress from those situations. I am not going to lie. Those were hard. I had a patient one of my cannabis hospice patients, he died looking into my eyes after he had been seizing for an hour. And I had walked into the home and the nurse was frantic. She couldn't get an order from one of the physicians for phenobarb, the Ativan. We typically use Ativan 3 times, and then we'll do a phenobarb if the seizure doesn't stop.
Right.
He was seizing for an hour, and the doctor, because whoever was on call, refused to give her an order for a PRN phenobarb because he didn't know the patient. So the patient suffered and was basically seizing for an hour. And when I walked in the door, I had a number for another physician, and I just called him up. I said, I need an order now. Drew up the phenobarb, went in, looked at him. I said, helps come in love. And I gave him his phenobarb, and he looked straight in my eyes, his body relaxed, and he died. Yep. So, I mean, sometimes you have situations like that and the family's distraught, and it's a, excuse my language, it's a fucking shit show.
Yeah.
But you do the best you can in those situations, and you find a way to bring comfort. And that was one that his face will be permanently imprinted. But then I have other beautiful moments where I've watched a mother and daughter surround their grandmother, and a room full of family, different religions in that space of, all the different ceremonies. It's just such a beautiful time. And I think that people are so afraid. We plan so much for birth and celebration of birth. We shouldn't be so afraid of the transition out. It's all it is we're transitioning in, we're transitioning out.
I say that all the time.
Yeah.
And I've come to the same conclusion as you. And so, folks, that opens up a whole new way of living when you're okay with death, when when you're just like, okay, it's going to come. Well, I better get busy living because I don't know when that day's going to come.
Correct.
It comes quicker than you think.
Absolutely.
Everybody I've ever been involved in as they transitioned and passed, before they passed, they have always all said, boy, that was so quick. I didn't realize it was going to go so quick. And so I try to live every day to the fullest.
Absolutely.
I know, I can tell you do. Yeah, absolutely.
I make an effort every day. So it's a discipline, it's a
Yeah.
mindset to wake
Mm,
up and be like, no, today I'm going to make it a point to be as positive as I can, to give love wherever I can. Some days I fail. Some days I don't do a really good job at that, but that's okay. I get to, hopefully, if I'm lucky enough, get up and try it again tomorrow. It's
yeah.
also nice to be able to reset, midday and be like, okay, there's still an opportunity to make this day a good day. But working hospice is definitely giving me a whole new perspective on life. I mean, I've struggled with depression and anxiety the majority, I would say, of my life. And so
Me too.
well, I feel like most of us, it's not so uncommon to say that anymore. It's like there's a large
No,
number of
but hey, we're talking about a lot of shit that people don't talk about. Okay, we're talking about death, cannabis,
yeah,
depression,
yeah.
anxiety. Like,
So once
guess
you
what?
know
All
that,
the things that everybody deals with, but we just don't talk about.
yeah, well, I talk about it. I'm an
I
open
do
book.
too. Oh,
Um, but
yeah.
I
Mm.
lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I know. That's okay. No, we're
So
talking about,
anyway, so we had
yeah.
birth and death. So that my whole point is that, you live your life, because just like we all wait and are waiting for that moment, unless it's a C-section, we have no idea when God, spirit, universe, whatever is going to pull you into the world. We have no idea when we're going to be pulled out.
That's
So
right.
there's necessary preparation that needs to be done before that happens. And there's a beauty to live every moment, because you just don't know. So
You just don't know.
hospice is just giving me that perspective. I did have to leave it because of basically my back. I couldn't move the patients anymore.
Hmm.
And it was getting real heavy on my heart. So that's usually when I take a step back. And that's not uncommon for me. I kind of do that through my nursing career. I need a minute, and I
Hmm.
need to kind of go, fill my soul in a different way, and then I can come back to it. But I continue
Beautiful.
to advocate very hard. I have a huge passion for helping patients through that process, advanced life
Yeah.
planning, and helping nurses have a conversation about it, because even nurses have a hard time talking about it, or they
Oh
don't want
yeah.
to. I'm
Because
super
they're,
fun at a party when
yeah.
people would ask me what I did. Oh, I work hospice.
Oh, I can
And they would
imagine.
go the other side. I'm like, come on, I
Oh
want to
yeah.
talk about it. No.
I know. I know. Totally. Well,
So
it's
when
like
I
that way.
found
It's
those
like that way
few.
with any of the stuff, It's that any of the stigma. Like if somebody asks, "Hey, how you doing?" Well, I'm a little bit depressed. Well, gotta go. See you later.
Yeah. Yeah.
How you doing? Oh, I broke my arm. Oh,
Turn
tell
the
me
other
about
way.
that. Tell me
Yeah,
about your
that's right.
broken arm.
That's
Oh, but
right.
your head's a little broken. Well, not so much. Maybe we won't have that
Well,
conversation.
what's sad is sometimes it's an affliction most of the time of the heart,
I
So
know.
it's like it is, they're all
Yeah,
connected. It's sad.
I
It's like
know.
people don't realize that mental health is so connected to that
Yeah,
spirit of who we are, and if we're in alignment with what we're, it's all about being in alignment in that flow,
right. Right. I do know. Intimately, I know. All right, let's talk about cannabis. So
Okay.
you got into this cannabis thing. And so what do you see in the hospice, specifically in hospice? How can cannabis be utilized to really help the patient, have a better end of life experience? Because end of
Well,
life is not so easy.
no, it isn't. There's a lot of mind, there's a lot of body stuff going on, there's a lot of
Hmm.
psychosocial dynamics, but from my experience and seeing patients utilize cannabis medicine in this space, I've noticed there is a decreased need for the amount of pharmaceuticals
Hmm.
required to manage their symptoms at a level that's like okay for them, comfortable enough, where they can be more cognizant, more alert, able to have those really important conversations at the end of life.
Yeah.
That sometimes when we used solely pharmaceuticals, the side effects of the sedation is too much that the patient ends up sleeping. And that's kind of one of those necessary things if you're in a lot of pain. And that's
Yeah.
so with cannabis, when we utilize the two of them, combine them, their synergy allowed for the medication to work and do its job. But the potentiation of that med from the cannabis, I believe, is what
Mhm.
allowed them to be more alert, to
Yeah.
have
I
those
told that
moments. And
I told that story earlier this week in a podcast that I was on, and we talked about what was like a really meaningful cannabis medicine moment. And I remember the first cannabis company that I was involved in, we got a letter from a family who had utilized some of the products for their mom who had cancer and was end of life. And they were so appreciative of the fact that their mom was aware to the last minute of her
Yeah,
life.
that's a big deal for
Last minute. Like the day before mom passed, mom wanted to take a drive in the car. Like
That's
she was
awesome.
super present, able
Good.
to talk. And the family was like, you know, before we started on the cannabis thing, mom was just sleeping all the time. And as soon as we added cannabis to the regimen, all of a sudden she's feeling good and aware. So that to me,
in a way where she can participate in life up until the very end.
To the end.
Yeah, that's the whole goal. People are so afraid of hospice, but that's the whole goal, is to give you that comfort and that ability to really do what you want to do right up into the last minute as much as possible.
Right.
But I've definitely
nobody likes to have that conversation though, right?
No, and I've definitely seen nurses that don't want to really, like, they'll just follow the treatment plan of what the doctor wrote, and the family's telling them, you know, they're too sedated, the patient feels too sedated, but they're not going to advocate for their patient and speak up and say, all right, well, let's see if we can change the meds. You know, and I mean, we need nurses to be able to have those conversations and then have the conversation about cannabis and CBD. So I would always throw that in there when the doc popped by. You know, can we, at least they're asking about CBD. Can you write an order for that? And that conversation. So I was always I'm such an instigator. I was always the one asking the question to the administration. And that's something I do want to talk about at some point, was how I got in front of my CNO at the hospice.
That's
so. You know, you have these moments that, and I just took every opportunity I could, Mark, once I knew about this medicine, to figure out a way to either talk to the family member, the patient, the physician, a fellow nurse, because I just had this mission to plant these seeds everywhere.
No pun intended. Plant
them everywhere. And those seeds started to grow after about a year and a half, you know? So, but yeah, nurses, ton of stigma within our nursing field here. Every specialty, nurses have a big deal and they cast judgment on patients with cannabis. I witnessed it in hospice, and my call to action is for every nurse to please educate yourself, because it is so vital in this space of end of life that you do not have a stigma. My theory is, like, if your patient wants to smoke meth and they're going to die in 2 days, I have no judgment. It is not my business to judge anything that you want to do to make sure your life is complete.
So that's part of the training in nursing school, is that you will not judge the patient about
for their choices.
They choose it.
Their journey.
Now we're really aware of, like, religious ceremonies and traditions and things like that, and honoring those. But when you're right, when somebody says, hey, you know what, I'm going to use cannabis, there still are a lot of people in the healthcare community that say, yeah, that's a bad thing. And all they're doing is regurgitating that the world is flat. Like, that's it. Like, that's the example I use. Like, the world was flat for 1,000 years. People absolutely agreed the world was flat. They had evidence for it. And you couldn't convince anybody that anything was different until Magellan circumnavigated the globe. And then they all said, well, what was that? And then I'm sure it was not an overnight agreement that, oh my God, the world's round. No, it was flat for a lot of people for a lot of time, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did my best for every opportunity I had to speak with a nurse, and that I had one moment with that patient I was telling you, died looking in my eyes, seizing. He used medical cannabis. He was about 50 years old, colon cancer. And it brought him comfort. And, you know, he was on 110 milligrams of IV morphine every hour. I mean, they could not.
Yeah, and that's acceptable. And that's acceptable.
He's constipated as all get out. He's miserable in that sense. And so I was the night nurse. I was the day shift nurse. And so I was coming on at 7 a.m. the first time I was in the home. And the nurse says to me as she's leaving, she says in report, you know, he smokes cannabis, or he smokes marijuana. I said, oh, he does? I said, good for him. And she was like, what? It smells, and I don't know if we're allowed to use, you know, how do I do this? It's illegal. And I had to literally educate her. I said,
well, it's not illegal. No, it's quite legal.
I said, well, yeah, I just gave her the rundown, and she actually left with, like, a better understanding. And she says, thank you. So, you know, it's just lack of information. I mean, when you have another colleague that's going to be like, hey, listen, so we got this system. It's a whole actual legit system. There is science.
It is
to,
education, right? There's been 80 years of
well, you got to talk to nurses to their intellectual part where that can make sense for them. Everybody's so research minded. They need proof, right? So
evidence-based.
there's your proof.
There's plenty of evidence out there. There's plenty of research that's been done. The cat's out of the bag. We can't put it back in again. Cannabis is a medicine, a very effective and safe alternative to a lot of, or an augmentation, as you said.
Yeah.
I'm not completely against pharmaceuticals. I mean,
no, they're absolutely necessary,
I've had my fair share.
Especially in the hospice realm.
Yeah.
They're absolutely necessary. We're talking about a collaboration here,
Right.
Nothing exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in medicine, I think that's not just one thing ever works. I mean, when we talk about balance, there's so many different
that's why I think nurses
what that
are at
means.
the forefront of the cannabis sort of revolution here, is because nurses are the ones who bring everything together, right? We're asked to
bring the conduits,
all of these things together and provide a care package for that patient.
Yeah.
Like the physician has a role that they do, and then you have the social worker that has a role that they do, and then you have the spiritual person in hospice. You have the
chaplain and the social worker.
They have their thing. Like, we pull from all of those things and coordinate all that for the
We're
patient.
Master collaborators.
We bring it all together.
Make it happen.
Right. We make it happen. Hey, that's right. Yeah. So it's an important role.
Yeah. And so now it's amazing. Excited. Nurses in cannabis medicine.
Oh, we're the ones at the forefront. We're making it happen.
Yeah, but we're going to be the ones that are going to be willing to collaborate with herbalists, with physicians, with chiropractors. What I think
is missing right now is that we don't collaborate enough with herbalists. I mean, these are people who had direct experience with plant medicine for, decades and decades and decades, or even longer. I mean, the genre of herbalism has been around for thousands of years, right? I mean, that was the predominant method of medicine.
Yeah.
That
from plants, from shamans, from healers. It
just makes sense that you bring that in. But again, there's that stigma. People say, oh, that's voodoo witchcraft. That's just foolish nonsense. They're
afraid of that connection.
Not so much, folks. Don't be so quick to judge. Yeah, don't be so quick to judge. There is a lot of evidence for that as well. Yeah. So tell me the story about getting in front of the CNO. Man, I love to hear stories about how, oh my God, you had to have this discussion, because again, the stigma. We're all about breaking that down with education, with providing the evidence that's available that people just don't have access to. So
yeah.
Take it away, Jamie.
This is a good story. I thought I was going to get my butt fired. I was like, oh, here we go. So yeah, again, right? So basically in 2018, I started hospice in 2017, 2018, or down here in Florida, I should correct myself. I got a bedside job 2017 in Florida, started True Health Consulting, which is my cannabis consulting firm, and started that. And then I was like getting like private, consult patients and private business consults. And I started a medical cannabis clinic. And so I'm like doing all this, trying to be putting myself out there on basically social media, getting my own community. I was going out giving presentations. So I was getting kind of known in my space, in my town, for cannabis nursing. So I'm thinking at some point somebody in hospice is going to know something or see something or say something, and it's going to get to somebody. I just kind of knew at some point that was just my two worlds were going to collide. And so they collided in a pretty intense way. I was working with a private cannabis patient, and that private cannabis patient ended up turning into an incredible opportunity to do a death with dignity experience, where I had to coordinate her going to Colorado to end her own life. She was a nurse herself, and I had this amazing experience with her. So my card happened to be on the table, and we got her into hospice because she was declining pretty quickly. We had kind of a timeline we needed to meet, but we needed help in there for her until we got her out there. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, I know I worked for one company, and there's basically two. There's such a monopoly on hospice down here. It's ridiculous. So if you get kicked from one, you don't really have another option. It's two big companies for this big, huge area of Florida. Anyway, whole nother conversation. So I I get a call from my direct supervisor because I guess the social worker for one of the companies, so she chose the company I worked for.
Yeah.
Social worker from my company saw my business card, my True Health Consulting, Cannabis Consulting Medicine on the coffee table, took a photo of it and sent it to, I guess, the book, trying to tattle me out. Like she's using, sorry, I don't want to say the name. She's using the company's name to market herself.
Right.
Which wasn't true. It was a totally different. So I get a phone call while I'm sitting bedside at another patient from my manager and the CNO.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like,
this is the serious thing.
I'm like,
How dare
holy
you provide
crap.
care to a patient that we
I'm
don't
like, here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they thought the situation was that I like poached the patient from the company. And I said, well, actually it's the other way in reverse. I'm like, I do private nursing consulting and I'm a per diem employee for them. So I can do whatever the heck I want. I do private nursing consulting, and I didn't want to tell them it was cannabis. Private nursing consulting, and that she was one of my patients and she's declining and she needed a hospice service. So I offered her the 2 hospices and she chose ours. So actually you got the referral from me.
Yeah.
So after that, she was like, oh, okay, well, the social worker mentioned that your business card, you were using the logo of our company. And can you please send us the picture of your business card? I was like, to prove. And I'm like, even that just felt like so. I'm like, but I had nothing to hide. I'm like, all right, Jamie, this is the moment.
Yeah.
This is the moment. So I sent the card over. And I waited, and I'm on the phone, and I, emailed it over. I said, see, I'm not using, your logo. I said, I do private consulting. Oh, so what kind of consulting is it? Well, I do, different consulting, helping patients. Okay, so your card says cannabis. I said, it does. She's like, so you work with cannabis? I said, I do. So what exactly do you do with cannabis? And so I told her what I did. I help patients when they're looking to use medical cannabis. I look to hook them up with a physician in my area. And then I help them through the process to figure out maybe what the best method of administration would be for them to start with. Maybe, I educate them about what kind of dose ranges people typically will start with. And
you actually provide them healthcare. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I do. So, she was completely interested. And this conversation went from, oh my God, I think I'm going to get my ass fired, to, can we set up a meeting that you can come in and talk to me further about those NCSBN guidelines and the policies surrounding that in the Florida medical marijuana program? I said, I would love nothing more. And so I had that conversation, and I brought in my printed out NCSBN guidelines and, total dork.
By the way, the guidelines folks say that every nurse should have education in the endocannabinoid system, which is what cannabis interacts with in your body. Only one of the largest neurotransmitting systems in your body.
Master regulatory system. We don't need to know about that.
No, let's keep that in the dark. That's only the basis of health. Yeah.
So it was awesome. I was able to go and sit in front of my highest level of management, working as a lowly per diem crisis care nurse. And I wasn't easy for them. I was a pain in the butt, of course. Like I said, I advocated hard, and when you do that, you're the squeaky.
Oh, you're gonna ruffle feathers, right? Because not everybody is into advocating. Some people are just wanting to get by.
Well, and get a paycheck. And I can understand that, everybody has their own place. But this is my role in this life. So it was just really wonderful to actually sit in that, to be there. I just had this grin. I'm like, holy crow, to be fired from my first nursing job to now be sitting here in front of and being heard. And it felt that it was that kind of.
It should. That's a win. That's
a big huge win.
Big
and
win.
I should actually, now that we're having this conversation, I should actually send her an email and reach back out to her and send her, the fact that I'm going to be speaking at a conference coming up, and send her some more information and just kind of have a touch point with her again, because she was interested. And it was the medical director that had reservations. So the physician governing the program was the one. The nurse didn't, but the physician did. So there's always work to be done, Mark.
Yes. There is. Well, Jamie, you know what? This is a perfect spot to take a break for the Nurse Mark Nugget. Maybe you don't know about that, but you will.
I know.
All right, hold on, folks. Yeah, we'll be right back. Welcome to this week's Nurse Mark Nugget, brought to you by Nurse Mark CBD products. You can get the highest quality tested CBD products at nursemark.co. That's nursemark.co. This week's nugget is about hospice. Hospice has been around since the 4th century, and it really started out as the monasteries and religious orders just opening up their doors and providing a roof over the heads of pilgrims, travelers, and old people. And they'd give them some food. It was really about that. It wasn't about providing care for the dying. But by the 19th century, it had taken on that new meaning of providing care for the dying. The first modern hospices were founded in Europe in the 1950s and 60s, and they made their way to the US. And by 1974, we had founded the first real modern hospice in the US. And then in the 1980s, the Medicare hospice benefit was created. And that allows for the federal government to pay for 6 months of hospice care, nothing out of pocket for the patient. And guess what? If you happen to live longer than that 6-month period, yay, you get to renew it for another 6 months, and on and on. It really, truly is a huge benefit at the end of life. And now you know. All right, folks, we're back with Jamie Rollins. Jamie, great conversation so far. Let me ask you, what can we do as nurses to kind of move this thing along? Because you have been advocating for a while, and you know some of the challenges associated with that, which you just talked about. The medical director, the physician, was pretty much against talking about it, which I have had that experience as well in the hospice community, where
they actually have policies against it.
I mean, to their benefit, they are very concerned about the patient, and they're very concerned about, things that they don't have any knowledge of, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how can we help them get there?
The biggest thing is keep opening your mouth. Keep having the conversation. You have to bust through that fear. I think too, I was in a spot where I didn't really care anymore if my nursing license was on the line. I didn't give a shit. I didn't care. I was like, you know what?
For me, that's not a problem, because my background is I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I had another company and sold it, building another company. But, for nursing, for me is a passion. Like if they take my nursing license away, I'm still Nurse Mark, because I earned that degree and I have that knowledge.
Absolutely.
If licensing authority decides that because of cannabis that they,
Well, and I just have the conversation, because we do have some protection. The NCSBN guidelines say we should be speaking about it.
We should.
So I think that is the number one thing that every single nurse, no matter where you are, no matter your level of education on cannabis, you can open your mouth and say you support it. And here's why. Because cannabis can be, again, it's very helpful for things like pain, inflammation, helps with breathing, combined with those other medications. So, and it gives opportunity, allows people to eat when you are at the end of your life and you are so nauseous, but you really want that, whatever it is, to be able to eat that, such little simple things, Mark.
I think sometimes people hesitate because they feel like don't have enough knowledge to have the conversation. But
that's right.
I will tell you, if you have any knowledge, you are far and away beyond most of your colleagues. So feel free to have the conversation. And you know what? The information is out there in their organizations. You mentioned them earlier. You're part of the Cannabis Nurse Network.
I am.
And American Cannabis Nursing Association. I'm a member of that. I'm a member of the Association of Cannabis Specialists, which is more of a physician group, which is fabulous, because we have, a monthly call. Here's one thing about joining an organization. You get the education. I know you get the education. You give education all the time. You're speaking.
Why? Because it's collaboration. We're learning.
Collaboration, right?
In cannabis medicine, we have to be doing
cannabis medicine. We have to, because we're
still
so early on.
Yeah, we can't isolate.
No.
We need to be able to collaborate and use that collective consciousness,
right,
to move this platform forward.
And I love
it's the only way.
Yeah, so the ACNA has a bunch of stuff that I love to attend, and I always
webinars.
And I have, again, the Association of Cannabis Specialists. Every month we have a conference call, and so we're all in this conference call, and I'm learning stuff all the time, because I'm talking with physicians who are trying to utilize this as cannabis as a medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And they have far and away much more knowledge about pharmaceuticals than I'll ever have, right? They've been living in this world and they've been trained in it. So to get their perspective about the pharmaceutical end of things and how cannabis weaves into that and in interactions and different stuff like that, hugely valuable. I mean, just so valuable for me to be sitting in on that conversation.
You know what's been the most valuable thing for me that I've gotten out of these organizations is the support, because this industry can bash your face in, kick you to the curb. It can chew you up and spit you out. So unless you have people that are in it with you and can understand what you're going through, I mean, people are like, oh, you're in the cannabis industry, how fun. I'm like, it is, it's wonderful, it's great. But there have been those moments, Mark, where I was like, you know what, screw it, I don't want to do any of this, I'm out, you know. And I had the support from the nurse. Some of my best friends are from these organizations.
Absolutely.
The support you get when you can call that person and be like, all right, so this just happened, now what the hell do I do? And you have that love and compassion and understanding and empathy from someone who's been in the space and who knows the feeling. It's priceless. I mean, it's priceless. So, and for me, I need support in that way. And so those organizations, they're just so great. I get all tingly when I think about it. It makes me so happy. The conferences are so fun. I love to get with that energy.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing.
Totally agree. Absolutely. So if there are nurses out there or physicians that are listening in on this podcast, join one of those associations, get in there, get busy. It's a world will open up that you have no knowledge of. And it's
even just like the Facebook thread, like the social media thread, somebody will go on and ask a question and then you get responses from like 20, 30, 40 different cannabis nurses, and it's collaboration and people asking questions. You're learning as you're going.
So I'll give you an example of that. So the ACNA Facebook group, I tossed out there one day, I said, hey, you know what? Send me the name of your favorite CBD company. Because I was doing some research in CBD brands and companies and so forth. And I wanted to see who the nurses thought were
instant feedback.
Oh my God, I got like 100 different companies, right? So I got 100 different companies, and I went out and did my due diligence and got all the information that I needed. All happened within a matter of like 15 minutes.
And you're like, thank you, nurses.
Yeah.
That's such a, that's like where
don't get me wrong, like any organization, when you throw something out there, sometimes there's a little bit of conflict going on, right? But it's good, it's healthy, because there's always a level of respect behind it that you can have a conversation that may be a little confrontational.
Well, I think too, in this space, we need to remember abundance. There is room for every single one of us and room for what every single one of us is supposed to bring to the table. We do not need to be competing, conflicting. I cannot stand that. That energy is a waste. If you take that energy where you're going to fight another nurse on an idea or something, nope, screw it. I want to support you, whatever you do. I want to be all my cannabis nurses cheerleaders.
Yeah, it's not just in this space. I mean, my experience in business over the past 35 years has been like that too. Like I was in the tech business, and as always, there were some companies that were, kill or be killed. And then there were a slew of other ones who got it, and we would collaborate, and there was always enough business for everybody, more than enough business. Right. And that's really the way it is in the cannabis space, I think, is that there's so much room for opportunity for everybody. Support.
And everybody has something unique to bring to the table, and I love that, the uniqueness. Like even if you take something like a CBD oil, how many nurses of us sell it, use it, share it, have companies doing it, but there's everybody on the planet has an endocannabinoid system. I think there's plenty of space for all of us to sell some CBD oil, right?
Yeah.
But why can't people wrap their heads around that? Like I would that collaborative community.
Because Jamie, it's the difference between that abundance or scarcity mindset. And most people operate in the scarcity mindset that there's just not enough. And so I better get mine.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. There's enough for everybody, which we know. We totally know. So Jamie, if people want to get a hold of you, because you're awesome and they definitely will want to, how can they get a hold of you?
You can email me at jamie@truehealthconsulting.com. I'm on Facebook, True Health Consulting. My Facebook page is actually public as well, Jamie Rollins. I do a lot of education and cannabis information. With that, I have an Instagram account. I don't even really know how to use it all that well, so I'll be honest about that, but I'm on there too.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. So we'll have all of your information up on the show notes anyway. So wherever people consume this podcast, you'll be able to look it up and find Jamie's information. And man, I know if they connect with you, they are going to get an education.
Thanks,
Whether
Mark.
they want it or not, they're going to get it.
I try and balance the fire with love, you know?
Right. I'm glad you came out of your shell for this particular podcast episode, Jamie.
It's really hard for me. I'm incredibly shy.
I can tell. Yeah, I can tell, definitely. All right, folks, that is, we're at the end. Jamie, if you got any last things, any, tidbit of information, some gem that you'd like to share, feel free to share it now.
Well, it's putting me on the spot, man. I
know.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for facilitating this conversation. I really do, at the break we were talking about the fact that I do have a 9-to-5 now. I do a consulting on my business on the side for the most part. And it was so nice to sit here and talk about, this passion of combining hospice and cannabis. And I just have this feeling in the future I will continue to do more of that. And I thank you for giving me the platform to chat about it for a moment with you.
I really appreciate you being a guest on the Nurse Mark podcast. It's such a blessing and a pleasure and an honor to have you here.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, that's it, folks. That's a wrap. Well, thanks, folks, for listening into another episode of the Nurse Mark podcast with my guest, Jamie Rollins. I hope you enjoyed learning about how hospice and cannabis can really combine together to give a quality end-of-life experience for those who are making the transition from this life to the next life. And some of the challenges that Jamie has had to work through working in the field, getting fired from a nursing position for testing positive, even though she had a medical cannabis card in a legal state, a back injury, the stigma, all of the challenges that she's had in trying to really integrate cannabis medicine into the hospice environment. Thanks again for listening in. And remember, today is the only day we have. Make it the best day ever.